In December 2022, a mother named Tiffany received a phone call that would shatter everything she believed about her family. Her two sons, Tyler and Eli Chaffin, had been missing for 3 days. No calls, no texts, just silence. But when police finally located them on December 23rd, they weren't victims of an accident or a crime. They were the criminals. And in the interrogation room that followed, the brothers would reveal something that made this case even more disturbing than a typical murder. They'd been manipulated, groomed, weaponized by someone they trusted. Someone who convinced them that killing a man they'd never met was an act of heroism. This is the story of how two brothers became killers, how a young woman orchestrated a murder, and how a mother discovered that the sons she raised were capable of the unthinkable. Tyler Chaffin was 21 years old in December 2022. Quiet, reserved, the kind of older brother who looked out for his younger sibling. Eli was 18, just out of high school. The two were inseparable, the kind of brothers who'd grown up relying on each other after their parents divorced years earlier. Their mother, Tiffany, had raised them alone. 2 jobs, constant sacrifice. She wasn't perfect, but she loved her sons unconditionally. To anyone who knew the Chaffin family, they seemed normal. Tyler worked part-time at a warehouse. Eli was figuring out his next steps. They lived with their mother, helped with bills, stayed out of trouble. The kind of young men who make quiet lives for themselves. The kind you'd never expect to see on the news. But on December 20th, 2022, everything changed. 70 miles away, in a small town neither brother had ever visited, a man named William Johnson was going about his day. 43 years old. Worked in construction. Had a 16-year-old daughter who he talked to every night before bed. William had no idea that his name had been mentioned in text messages between 2 strangers. He had no idea that those strangers were planning to kill him. And he had no idea that the woman he'd recently broken up with had decided he didn't deserve to live. Her name was Sierra, 19 years old, and she'd been in a relationship with William for 6 months before he ended things in early December. Sierra didn't take rejection well. But instead of moving on, she did something far more calculated. She found 2 young men who wanted to feel important, 2 brothers who wanted to be heroes, and she convinced them that William Johnson was a monster who needed to be stopped. Sierra met the Chaffin brothers in late November, just weeks after William had ended their relationship. The details of how they met aren't entirely clear. Some reports say it was through mutual friends. Others suggest a dating app. But what happened next follows a textbook pattern of manipulation. Sierra presented herself as vulnerable, scared, someone who needed protection. And Tyler and Eli, protective by nature and eager to feel useful, fell right into the trap. Early December. Sierra started telling the brothers that William was bothering her. Text messages, showing up at her work, following her car. She showed them screenshots of texts that, she claimed, proved William was stalking her. The brothers believed every word. Tyler would later testify that Sierra seemed genuinely terrified, that she'd cry during phone calls, that she made them feel like her only hope. Within a week, Sierra's stories got worse. William wasn't just texting her anymore. He was threatening her, saying he'd hurt her if she didn't come back to him. The brothers asked why she didn't go to the police. Sierra had an answer ready. They won't do anything unless he actually hurts me. By then, it'll be too late. This is a common manipulation tactic. Create a problem that only the target can solve. Make them feel like the hero before they've done anything. And it was working. By mid-December, Sierra was planting the seed of violence. "I don't know what to do," she told Tyler in a phone call on December 15th. "He's not going to stop. Talking doesn't work with people like him." "What are you saying?" Tyler asked. "I'm saying sometimes you have to protect yourself, even if it means doing something extreme." Tyler didn't agree immediately, but he didn't say no either. And that's all Sierra needed. December 19th, 1 day before the murder. Sierra sent a text to both brothers. "We need to end this tomorrow. Are you with me?" Tyler responded first. "We got you. Whatever you need." Eli followed 8 minutes later. "I'll do anything to protect you." What the brothers didn't know, what they wouldn't realize until they were already in too deep, was that Sierra had been planning this for weeks. She'd researched William's schedule. She knew when he'd be home alone. She'd mapped out the route from her apartment to his house. And she'd carefully constructed a narrative that positioned the brothers as defenders, not murderers. By the time Tyler and Eli realized what they were actually agreeing to, it would be too late to back out. December 20, 2022, 11:47 p.m. William Johnson was at home, watching TV in his living room, when his phone rang. It was Sierra. According to phone records, they talked for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Sierra told William she wanted to talk, one last conversation, to get closure on their relationship. William, perhaps hoping they could part on good terms, agreed. He told her to come over. What William didn't know was that Sierra wasn't planning to come alone. At 10:32 p.m., over an hour before Sierra called William, she'd sent a text to Tyler and Eli. "Be at my place at 11. Bring gloves. Wear dark clothes." When the brothers arrived at her apartment at 11:15, Sierra gave them their instructions. According to Tyler's later testimony, she told them, "I'll go in first. I'll unlock the back door. Wait 5 minutes, then come in through the back. He can't know you're there until it's too late." Tyler asked, "What are we doing when we get inside?" Sierra looked him directly in the eye. "Whatever it takes to make sure he never hurts anyone again." Eli would later claim he thought they were just going to scare William, to threaten him into leaving Sierra alone. But the gloves, the dark clothes, the back door entry, the explicit instruction to wait until it was too late for William to react. This wasn't a plan to scare someone. This was a plan to kill. 11:52 p.m. Sierra pulled into William's driveway. Security camera footage from a neighbor's house shows her car arriving, shows her walking to the front door, shows the door opening as William led her inside. 5 minutes later, at 11:57 p.m., the back door of William's house was unlocked from the inside. At 12:03 a.m. on December 21st, Tyler and Eli Chaffin entered through that back door. William Johnson was in his living room, talking to Sierra when the brothers walked in. What happened next was brutal. According to the medical examiner's report, William was stabbed 17 times. The attack lasted approximately 4 minutes. He died before paramedics could arrive. The brothers would later describe those 4 minutes differently in their interrogations. Tyler claimed Eli lost control and did most of the stabbing. Eli claimed Tyler was in charge, and he only helped because his brother told him to. But the forensic evidence painted a different picture. Both brothers' DNA was on the murder weapon. Both had defensive wounds on their hands, suggesting William fought back. Both had participated in the killing. At 12:07 a.m., just 4 minutes after the murder, Sierra sent a text to Tyler. "It's done. Get rid of everything. I'll handle the rest." The brothers left through the back door, got in their car, and drove 43 miles to a remote field where they burned their clothes. 12:18 a.m., Sierra finally contacted emergency services. She reported discovering her friend, William, inside his home unresponsive, surrounded by blood. She claimed she had just arrived. She sounded frantic, panicked, overwhelmed. Dispatch kept her on the line for 6 minutes while officers were sent to the address. To anyone listening, it sounded convincing. But the timeline didn't agree. A neighbor's security camera showed Sierra's car pulling into William's driveway at 11:52 p.m. It never left. She had been inside the house for 26 minutes before making that call. That gap, quiet, unexplained, and impossible to justify, became the first loose thread. And once it was pulled, everything else began to unravel. Detective Marcus Reynolds arrived at William Johnson's house at 7 a.m. on December 21st. What he found didn't match Sierra's story of a random break-in. Nothing was stolen. William's wallet was on the counter. His laptop was on the coffee table. His phone was sitting right next to his body. The back door was unlocked, but there were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no kicked-in doors. And when investigators processed the scene, they found something interesting. Fingerprints on the back door handle that didn't belong to William. 2 sets. Unknown. Detective Reynolds had seen staged crime scenes before, and this had all the hallmarks. At 2 p.m. on December 21st, Sierra maintained the same account. She claimed she had just arrived, that she discovered William already dead, that she had no idea who was responsible. The story held until investigators introduced her phone records. The timeline collapsed instantly. Messages sent minutes before the emergency call contradicted everything she had said. The content made it clear she wasn't reacting to a crime. She was managing the aftermath. At that point, the interview ended. Not because the questions were finished, but because the evidence had caught up. Those text messages led them to 2 phone numbers. Those numbers were registered to burner phones, but cell tower data placed both phones at William's house at the time of the murder. And when investigators cross-referenced the numbers with other recent activity, they found something else: calls and texts between those phones and Sierra's number going back 3 weeks. Hundreds of messages. Dozens of calls. This wasn't a random crime. This was planned. By December 22nd, investigators had identified Tyler and Eli Chaffin as the owners of those burner phones. Arrest warrants were issued at 7:15 p.m., but when police arrived at the brothers' home, they were gone. Tiffany Chaffin told police she hadn't seen her sons since December 20th. She'd been calling and texting, but they hadn't responded. She had no idea what they'd done. She had no idea they were running from a murder charge. For the next 32 hours, police conducted a multi-county manhunt. K-9 units, helicopter surveillance, highway patrol, 3 counties worth of law enforcement searching for 2 brothers who'd never been in trouble before. December 23rd, 11 a.m. Tyler Chaffin called his mother. His voice was shaking. Whatever had happened, it was serious. He told her they had made a mistake, one that couldn't be undone. She assumed it was something minor, a bad decision, an accident, something fixable. But Tyler made it clear it wasn't. He refused to explain over the phone, only saying they had tried to help someone and that everything had gone catastrophically wrong. By the time the call ended, she understood this wasn't a problem. It was a disaster. Tiffany called the police immediately. She gave them Tyler's phone number, his last known location, everything she knew. And at 2:47 p.m. on December 23rd, police surrounded a gas station 14 miles from the Chaffin home. Tyler and Eli were inside, buying food. They surrendered without resistance. As Tyler was placed in the back of a patrol car, he said something to the arresting officer that would become central to his defense. "I didn't want to do it." She said he was going to hurt her. Tyler Chaffin's interrogation lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes. For the first hour, he barely spoke, just sat there, staring at the table, occasionally wiping his eyes. When investigators shifted the focus to Sierra, Tyler opened up. He explained how they met and how she slowly built the story. She spoke about William as a stalker. She presented herself as afraid, isolated, and in danger. She shared messages she claimed proved it. The fear felt real, convincing. She made them feel necessary, like the only people who could step in before something terrible happened. Tyler believed her. At the time, he thought the threat was real. He believed she was in danger and that doing nothing could cost her life. So, he agreed to help. He said the plan was never to kill anyone. The idea, as he understood it, was confrontation to scare William, to make him back off. That illusion shattered just before they left. On December 20th, Sierra handed Tyler a knife. That was the moment he realized this wasn't about protection. The weapon wasn't an accident. Tyler later admitted it had been brought intentionally. Sierra framed it as a backup plan, something to use only if William refused to cooperate. That alone established premeditation. When investigators confronted Tyler about the attack, he broke. He acknowledged stabbing William, but couldn't say how many times. There was no count, no control. Everything escalated in seconds. As the weight of that admission set in, Tyler tried to redirect blame. He claimed the violence spiraled when Eli, his younger brother, lost control. But the attempt fell flat. The presence of the weapon, none of it supported a story of chaos. It pointed to intent, but the detective had already interviewed Eli separately, and Eli's story was different. Eli Chaffin's interrogation was shorter but more emotional. He cried through most of it, repeatedly asked if he could call his mother, seemed genuinely shocked by what he'd done. Eli told investigators he became involved because Tyler framed the situation as an emergency. Sierra, he said, needed protection. William was described as dangerous, a threat that couldn't be ignored. Eli didn't describe being forced. He described trust. Tyler was his older brother. If Tyler said someone was a threat, Eli believed him. That belief carried him forward without question. Only later did doubt begin to surface. The story stopped lining up. Details shifted. Motives blurred. By the time Eli began to suspect Sierra hadn't been truthful, it was already too late. Eli shook his head. Not until after. After everything happened, Tyler and I were driving away, and I asked him, "Why did we do that?" And he said, "I don't know." That's when I knew we'd been used. Eli claimed he'd only stabbed William once, in self-defense, after William tried to fight back. The forensic evidence told a different story. Eli's DNA was all over the knife. The attack patterns showed he'd been an active participant, not a reluctant bystander. After 6 hours of separate interrogations, both brothers had said the same thing. Sierra manipulated them. Sierra planned it. Sierra was the real killer. And they were right. But that didn't make them innocent. Because at the end of the day, Tyler and Eli Chaffin made a choice. They could have said no. They could have called the police. They could have walked away. Instead, they followed Sierra to a stranger's house and stabbed him 17 times. As investigators dug into Sierra's background, a disturbing pattern emerged. William Johnson wasn't her first victim of manipulation. Sierra had a history of fabricating threats, creating crises that required rescuing, positioning herself as a victim to gain sympathy and control. A former boyfriend told police that Sierra had once claimed a stalker was following her, only for him to later discover she'd been sending the threatening messages to herself from a burner phone. A former roommate reported that Sierra had accused a mutual friend of stealing from her, complete with fake evidence, because she was jealous of the friend's relationship. Sierra wasn't just manipulative. She was a predator who identified vulnerable people and weaponized them for her own purposes. On December 24th, investigators obtained a warrant for Sierra's phone. What they found was devastating. Voice memos. Dozens of them. Sierra had recorded herself giving Tyler and Eli instructions on how to kill William. "You go in through the back," she said in one recording. "I'll distract him in the living room. He won't see you coming." In another recording, dated December 18th, "Use a knife, not a gun. Guns are loud. Neighbors will hear." And in one particularly chilling memo from December 19th, "Don't hesitate. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. You go in, you do what needs to be done, you leave. 4 minutes, maximum." She documented everything, the planning, the logistics, the murder itself. Why would someone record evidence of their own crime? Psychologists later suggested Sierra suffered from narcissistic personality disorder with psychopathic traits. She believed she was too smart to get caught. She thought having the recordings would give her leverage over the brothers' proof that they'd agreed to kill, proof that she could use against them if they ever turned on her. But instead, those recordings sealed her fate. On December 28th, Sierra was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Unlike the Chaffin brothers, she didn't confess, didn't cry, didn't show any remorse. In her first court appearance, Sierra maintained that she was also a victim, that the brothers had acted without her knowledge, that they'd misunderstood her concerns about William and taken matters into their own hands. But the voice recordings said otherwise. The text messages said otherwise. The evidence was overwhelming. On January 15th, 2023, Tyler and Eli Chaffin appeared in court. Their lawyers had negotiated plea agreements in exchange for testimony against Sierra. Tyler pled guilty to second-degree murder. 35 years in prison. Eligible for parole after 25. Eli pled guilty to manslaughter. 20 years. Eligible for parole after 15. The disparity reflected their perceived roles. Tyler was older. He'd agreed to help Sierra first. He'd brought Eli into it. The murder weapon had primarily his fingerprints. Eli was 18, less mature. Following his brother's lead, prosecutors argued he bore less responsibility. William Johnson's family was present for both hearings. His daughter, 16 years old, read a victim impact statement. "My dad wasn't perfect," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But he didn't deserve this. He was killed by people he'd never met for reasons that didn't even exist. And now I have to grow up without him." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Sierra's trial began on March 3rd, 2023. It lasted 11 days. Tyler and Eli both testified against her, described her manipulation, played the voice recordings, read the text messages aloud. Sierra's defense attorney tried to argue that the brothers were lying to reduce their own sentences, that they'd killed William of their own accord and were now blaming a convenient scapegoat. But the evidence didn't support that theory. The messages between Sierra and the brothers went back weeks. The voice memos proved premeditation. Sierra's own 911 call showed she'd waited 26 minutes before reporting the murder she'd orchestrated. On March 17th, after 14 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Sierra was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She showed no emotion as the sentence was read, no tears, no outburst, just a blank stare. On April 2nd, 2023 just 16 days after her conviction Sierra was found dead in her jail cell. The cause of death: suicide by hanging. She'd left a note. In it, she admitted everything: the manipulation, the planning, the lies about William. "I wanted him to pay for leaving me," she wrote. "I found 2 idiots who'd do it for me. They were so easy to control, so desperate to feel important." Even in death, Sierra showed no empathy for William, no remorse for destroying the Chaffin family, just cold calculation and contempt. Throughout the legal proceedings, Tiffany Chaffin sat in the courtroom every single day. She listened to the evidence, heard her sons testify, watched them be sentenced to decades in prison, and when the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement, she stood up and spoke directly to the court. "I raised my sons to be good men," she said, her voice shaking. "I taught them to protect people who needed help, to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves." She paused, wiping her eyes. Sierra saw those qualities in them and twisted them into weapons. She turned their empathy into violence, their desire to help into a willingness to kill. But that doesn't excuse what they did. They made a choice. They took a man's life, and they have to live with that forever. Tiffany looked at William Johnson's daughter in the front row. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive them. I don't know if I can forgive them, but I want you to know that your father didn't deserve what happened to him, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand how my sons became capable of this." The courtroom was silent. Tyler Chaffin is currently serving his sentence at a maximum security facility. He'll be eligible for parole in 2048 when he's 54 years old. Eli Chaffin is at a different facility. He'll be eligible for parole in 2038 when he's 36. Both brothers have expressed remorse. Both have undergone psychological evaluation and counseling. Both claim they were manipulated, and they were. But manipulation doesn't erase guilt. William Johnson is buried at a cemetery outside the town where he lived. His daughter visits his grave every week. She's now 17. Starting her senior year of high school, applying to colleges, trying to build a life without the father she loved. And Tiffany Chaffin lives with a question that haunts her every single day. How did the sons she raised become killers? The Chaffin brothers' case raises uncomfortable questions about manipulation, accountability, and the nature of evil. Were Tyler and Eli victims? Yes. Sierra deliberately targeted them, exploited their vulnerabilities, and engineered a murder. But were they also perpetrators? Absolutely. They chose to follow through. They chose to enter that house. They chose to bring a weapon. They chose to use it. Manipulation can explain behavior without excusing it. This case also exposes how easily people can be weaponized, how quickly good intentions can be twisted into violence, how dangerous it is to believe someone without questioning their motives. Sierra saw 2 young men who wanted to feel like heroes. She gave them a villain. She made herself the victim, and she convinced them that murder was heroism. That's the scariest part of this story. Not that Sierra was evil a euro. There are plenty of evil people in the world. But that Tyler and Eli weren't. They were just 2 brothers who wanted to help someone, and that desire was turned into a weapon. William Johnson paid for it with his life. Tyler and Eli Chaffin will pay for it with decades in prison. And Tiffany Chaffin will pay for it by living every day knowing her sons are killers. There are no winners in this story, only victims. And a reminder that manipulation is one of the most dangerous weapons that exists, because it turns people into monsters without them even realizing it. The case of the Chaffin brothers serves as a stark warning about coercive control and psychological manipulation. If this story impacted you, share it. Not for views, but to spread awareness about how manipulation works and how to recognize it. Next time, we'll examine a case where a man lived a double life for 30 years, complete with 2 families who never knew about each other. Subscribe to follow more investigations into the psychology behind crimes that defy understanding.